don't know, man. I woke up the next morning real super early and I was just like, I can't do this anymore. Like, I need help. And I had been contemplating for, months about going into inpatient rehab. But I kept thinking to myself, like, what are people going to think of me? Right? Meanwhile, everyone knew I was a drunk. When I came home, I just immersed myself, in Alcoholics Anonymous, and it became my life. I'm grateful for that. That was my solution. I grieved so hard when I stopped drinking. It was like I lost my best friend. But my life today, it's amazing. I have some humility today and I have peace in my life. My sponsor always says, do you want to be sober? Or do you want to be peaceful? And I'm like, I want to be peaceful. Yeah, it takes work, but so much better on this side of it.
Welcome to the Daily Reflection Podcast with your hosts, Michael L. and Lee M. On this podcast, we try to bring inspiration through interviews with members of the recovery community. We are not affiliated with any 12-step program, but you may hear them mentioned throughout the course of an interview. Today on the show, Heather E. from Ashburn, Virginia. Heather shares on the concept around the idea of faith. Before we get to the episode, can I ask you to do me a favor? If you're listening to this podcast on Apple Podcasts, if you wouldn't mind, give us a rating, leave a comment, let us know what you think of the show. It's going to help us reach a larger audience, and it'll obviously let us know what you think of the show. Always trying to improve. Thanks so much. We greatly appreciate it. Enjoy the show. Good morning, Lee. How are you?
Good morning. I'm great. It's March 6th, and it's a beautiful day. How are you doing?
Oh, never better. It's great to start another show for sure. What's going on for today? What's on the agenda?
Well, today we have a dear friend of mine, Heather E. from Ashburn, Virginia, joining us to talk to us about the idea of faith.
Fantastic. Well, Heather, welcome to the show. It's great to have you on the podcast.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Great. Well, we start the show by asking the guest to read the daily reflection for today. Would you help us get started?
Sure. The idea of faith. Do not let any prejudice you may have against spiritual terms deter you from honestly asking yourself what they mean to you. Alcoholics Anonymous, page 47. The idea of faith is a very large chunk to swallow when fear, doubt, and anger abound in and around me. Sometimes just the idea of doing something different, something I'm not accustomed to doing, can eventually become an act of faith if I do it regularly, and I do it without debating whether it's the right thing to do. When a bad day comes along and everything is going wrong, a meeting or a talk with another drunk often distracts me just enough to persuade me that everything is not quite as impossible, as overwhelming as I had thought. In the same way, going to a meeting or talking to a fellow alcoholic are acts of faith. I believe I'm arresting my disease. These are ways I slowly move towards faith in a higher power.
That is a beautiful reading. How does this resonate with you, Heather?
It's funny because when I was going through and trying to figure out which one I wanted to do, and I read this and I was like, wow. For me, I was raised Catholic, went to church, did all those things, I guess, that were expected of me. At points in my life, I felt a connection with a higher power, but I always questioned it or wondered what it really was. And I lost my sister back in about 18 years ago. When she passed away, I really lost all my faith. I felt God was very punishing. I didn't understand. I felt like he had disappeared. I had no idea who he was. And it wasn't really until when I got sober and started working the steps, and I kind of floated, step one, easy, I got it. Step two, I kind of floated over, and when I got to step three, I always wondered why I had such a struggle letting go. Let go, let God. I could say it. I could say all the great things that we say, talk the talk, but I wasn't walking the walk, basically. And it wasn't until I was about 4.5, 5 years sober, I got a new sponsor, and she took me through the steps using the big book. And when we got to step two, and I was talking with her, I explained to her, I said, I feel like I have like this wall or this block between God and I. And no matter what I tried to do, I felt like no matter what I said or did, I couldn't break down that block or get that connection with him. And, she explained to me, she said, well, who is your higher power? And I'm like, I'm not sure. Um, and what I found out is that I had so many prejudices against really not God, but against Catholicism, that I used those prejudices to keep me from connecting. And I had no definition of who my God really was. And, taking the time to sit and do that and figure out, like, what is this God to me? And what is the difference between the prejudices I have with the faith that I was raised in, or the religion that I was raised in, and, my, I guess, newfound connection with God. And once I did that, and really defined who God was to me, it was like this huge, like, I mean, for me, that was a huge spiritual awakening for me. Um, and I've really been able to connect now, and get into a practice of, getting on my knees every morning and talking to God. I always talk to God. I'm one of those crazy people that, thank God we have Bluetooth, because when I'm driving, I'm constantly talking to, what people would think is somebody else, but I'm really talking to God. Of course, during the crazy days when I was in active addiction, I did a lot of the poop prayers, with one eye covered. If you just get me home this time, or, if people really just didn't see those text messages I sent last night, or, if, if I could continue to play like I'm not a drunk to my ex-husband, all those things. I never prayed for what God's will was for me. And, once I started doing that, my life changed dramatically. So
Heather, what's your sobriety date?
7/26/14, July 26, 2014.
So it says in the reflection, sometimes just the idea of doing something different, something I'm not accustomed to doing, can eventually become an act of faith if I do it regularly and do it without debating whether it's the right thing to do. And I'm wondering, do you have experience with that?
Oh gosh, yes.
Practice?
In the beginning of my sobriety, I did a lot of things differently. And at that time, I wasn't attributing that to my higher power, to any type of faith. Now I continue to do a lot of things differently, but when it comes to my faith and to connection with my higher power, it's not just checking a box for me. I have a morning routine, and if I don't do that morning routine, I can fall off the beam real fast. And I don't practice anything perfectly. I do have my mornings where I have to remind myself, like, okay, this is not a checklist, and if I have to get up a little earlier to do it, I'll do it. And just the fact that I pray and that I meditate, those are all brand new things to me. And I think the biggest thing is that when I pray, it's for God's will. It's not for Heather's will, which, don't get me wrong, I take that back probably multiple times a day. But I really try and have, let God lead me in whatever direction he feels I need to be led. And there's just so much, like, peace in that. So much peace in that.
So it goes on to talk about when bad days happen. What's a bad day look like, and how do you respond?
Honestly, and this is, I don't have a lot of bad days anymore. I really don't. First of all, I look at my days differently, where now I'm just grateful to open my eyes in the morning, and not feel like crap. I'm grateful that, that I actually have a higher power and a God that I can talk to. But I am normal, obviously. Well, that's debatable, but I do have, some bad days, but I just handle things so differently. We have a daily reprieve, and I can start my day over any time of the day. I have so many incredible women in my fellowship that I can call. I have a wonderful sponsor. A lot of times too, for me, even if I just go back and read something in the literature, our literature for AA, it kind of brings me back. And it's funny because sometimes I say, like, how am I I'm just very calm and very, my kids might disagree with that, but I just live my life so differently now. And I often say, like, how did I get here? But it honestly is obviously a lot of work, and it's just keeping myself on, like I say, on the beam. And I don't take things so, like, I'm not the victim anymore. Oh my gosh, I was such a victim. Everybody was doing everything to me. Even if I didn't know you and something happened, it was directed to me. And now I don't feel that way at all.
So before you came in and got sober and started to find this amazing spiritual toolkit, what are some of the things that you experienced that led you to believe that you might have a problem with alcohol?
It's funny because when I first got sober and I came into AA, and I would say, oh, well, I've only been a drunk for 3 years, right? And then you do the steps and you realize, wow, I've been drinking alcoholically my entire life. It's not normal for a 13-year-old to black out. It's not normal to have patches of your life that you don't remember. For me, it started physically. I had a stomach full of ulcers, very, very sick. I was gotten very thin and just not, healthy physically. I had absolutely no spiritual connection whatsoever. I was destroying my marriage, which, now looking back on that, I can own my side of the street with that. My boss at the time, so in 2012, my boss basically called me out and said I was an alcoholic. He himself has been a dry drunk for multiple years. And that was 2012. I didn't get sober till 2014. I was being very shady, doing a lot of things, but I had a hard time realizing that I knew I was powerless. I even remember saying to my ex-husband one time, like, you don't understand, like, I have to do this. I have to drink. I mean, it came to a point where it had to be the first thing I did in the morning just to stabilize myself, and I had this crazy routine to make sure that I could manage my day and then still, go pick up my kids from school and play mom. And, but I knew, like, what I struggled with was the unmanageability. It's that thing where you think, well, I'm still working and my house is clean, my kids are clean, I'm the PTO president, all of that. And meanwhile, it was like all these things, I worked so hard to keep all those things looking good from the outside because I was a freaking debacle mess on the inside. It really hit me in every way, emotionally, physically, mentally. I wasn't trusted anymore by my family. My poor parents, they live in Massachusetts, and, my kids, I remember one time my dad had to call the cops from Massachusetts on me because my son, I don't even remember now what I was doing, but obviously he was not comfortable. To put my parents in that situation, like, just, it still breaks my heart, yeah. And, I didn't get it the first time around. I did an outpatient. I was sober for about 98 days and relapsed. And then I was doing some real crazy things, just thinking I was kidding the entire world, not nice, not good.
What do you think made you get it this time, or what made you be open enough to surrender?
So sometimes I think I had like this spiritual awakening when I was sleeping. And I know that sounds awkward, but to kind of explain it a little bit, it was a Thursday night. I had been in Massachusetts for about 2 weeks. My dad had an aortic aneurysm, and I went up. My kids were actually with my parents in Massachusetts because my drinking was out of control, and I was trying to move us from Maryland to Virginia. And I came back, and it was a Thursday when I came back with my kids. And, of course, and at this point, my kids hadn't even seen where we were living. And, I got home and I said, I'm going to run down and get some milk from the store. Okay. We all knew what I was getting. And, unbeknownst to me, while I was gone, my son called my sister-in-law, and she came over, and I came home and I'm like, oh, what are you doing here? And she said, I'm going to take the boys. We haven't seen them. And I'm like, okay. So fast forward, for me, it was like, okay, good. They're gone again. I can drink. I've been around my freaking family for like 2 weeks. And like, even there I was hiding it. I told my parents, I said, when you clean out your basement, you're going to find some things. And I just started drinking, and I went to bed that night really with no desire or thought like, okay, I'm done. And I don't know, man, I woke up the next morning real super early, and I was just like, I can't do this anymore. Like, I need help. And I had been contemplating for, months about going into inpatient rehab. And, but I kept thinking to myself, like, what are people going to think of me? Right. Meanwhile, everyone knew I was a drunk. Um, and I just said, that's it. Like, I'm done. So like any good alcoholic, I went to the store and I got lots of wine. And it's funny, I laugh about it today. I sat and watched that movie with Meg Ryan and Andy Garcia, you know, and got drunk and played the poor me. And then called my ex-husband and my boss at the time in my insurance company. And I said, I'm done. I need to go away. And I went into detox, and then I went into inpatient rehab. And I just really immersed myself in myself, learning about my disease and getting everything I could out of being away and being in rehab. And I don't know, that obsession and that compulsion at that point was lifted. I had certainly had a long way to go. I still have a long way to go, but the compulsion and the obsession and the need to drink was so severe for me. So just with that being lifted, I felt like, okay, like I can do this. And when I came home, I just immersed myself, in Alcoholics Anonymous, and it became my life. It is, a huge part of my life, and I'm grateful for that.
How long did it take you to start to get some relief once you came in?
I'm still getting relief. It ebbs and flows, I think. Obviously from a physical standpoint, and I think the biggest thing for me too is when I came into the program, I was also, separated, starting to go through a divorce. And when I was in rehab, I kept saying to myself, oh, when I get out, I'm going to fix everything. I'm going to fix my marriage. My kids are going to love me and want to be around me. And, all these things. And in the rooms, I'd have people in the fellowship say, because, when you first get in, you're not talking solution. You're just bitching about how terrible your life is still, and not picking up a drink. But, people in the rooms would say, oh, well, you need to pray. You need to pray about him. Speaking of my ex-husband, because that was probably the most difficult thing that I was trying to wrap my head around. And I was like, oh, you don't want to know what I would pray for him. And they said, well, it's okay. You don't have to be sweet about it, but you need to pray about it, and you'll start to let go. And I did, and it did. It started to lift. Just getting around people that got it, and understood me and took me under their wing, and just kept telling me, like, just keep coming back, and all the cliches that we like to say, just wait for the miracle to happen, and and it has. It still continues to.
Do you think this disease is hereditary? I mean, are you an alcoholic from the start?
I do think it's funny because even they say that, that scientifically 60% chance my kids will have it, could have it. So yeah, I think I was predestined for it, and I used to look at that and get kind of pissed, and be like, why me? And I have a sister that was an addict, and I'd say, why me? Why was I chosen? And I don't look at it like that anymore. Like, me, I was chosen. I wouldn't be living the life I live now or be the person I am if I wasn't an alcoholic. I don't, yeah, I went through some crap because of it. But I don't know. I wouldn't change it, yeah, and obviously I have that worry. I've got 2 boys, it's scary, but all I can do is show them how to live a sober life, and, show them what I do. And just like everything else, they're going to make their own choices, and I can't stop it if it's going to happen, So, but yeah, I mean, I come from a long line of them myself. So it's in the gene pool for sure on both sides. Lucky me.
I love what you said about not wanting to change anything. I feel the same way.
Yes.
That this is a gift.
It is a gift.
I've been given the most amazing gift, and I wouldn't have gotten it without the dark days that preceded it. What's occurring to me as you were sharing is that there are a lot of people who are either thinking about coming in or they're in, and their life has just been blown up. They're getting a divorce. The kids don't want to talk to them, or they lost their job, or maybe some of that or all of it, or even more stuff, and they just want all of it put back together right now. What would you say to those people?
Stay where your feet are. It'll all come in time if you put the work in. You got to work it. It's, you don't get sober and all of a sudden, life becomes fantastic and, we're all burping rainbows. It just doesn't happen that way. Time takes time. I remember when I first got sober, my sponsor used to say to me, time takes time. And I'd be like, that is the stupidest shit. Like, who says that? And now I say it all the time to people. It does. We did a lot of damage and it takes time to repair that damage. Now in my professional career, I deal with addicts and alcoholics all day long and families. And, I hear it. I know it. I've been on both sides of it. And for the newcomer too, I would just say, stay where your feet are. Like we say, take the cotton out of your ears, put it in your mouth and listen and pray. Gosh, pray. I know they say not to pray for patience, but we need a lot of patience. We're alcoholics, man. We want it now. It's not happening fast enough. And it's amazing, for me, like I fast forward in my head sometimes to the last 6+ years of my sobriety. And I'm like, wow, like it has flown by. But, I lived that every day. It didn't feel like it went fast when it was going, just stay where your feet are. And, I work with a lot of women in the program now. And, I just tell them like one foot in front of the other. Set goals for yourself, but don't overwhelm yourself. And learn to open your mouth. You got to talk to people. You got to tell us where you're at. But again, and for me, prayer has become such a huge part of it. But I know that takes time for sure. So just, we say one day at a time. Sometimes it's 1 second at a time, and I still have days like that where I got to compartmentalize and take things piece by piece in order to be able to stay present in what I'm doing. And, that's hard to tell a newcomer. I tend to find myself saying, I get it a lot when I'm dealing with women that are new in the program. But I do get it. Having that empathy for somebody and that sympathy for somebody is, I'm grateful for it today.
Sometimes that's the most important thing you can hear is that somebody gets it.
Yeah, for sure. Because you feel like nobody does, Yeah.
Yeah. It's wonderful to feel a part of, a group of people that have experienced the same thing. One thing that's jumping out to me about the daily reflection is that it's a lot of faith, a lot of higher power in there. I mean, the last sentence talks about moving slowly toward faith in a higher power. And it sounds like, you've clearly got a higher power in your life today. Before we begin to wrap up, any suggestions for folks that are struggling with the concept of something more powerful than themselves?
I remember when I came into AA, people said, well, you can make anything your higher power, make your fellowship the higher power, and for me, I did that in the beginning. I don't necessarily agree to make the doorknob your higher power. I've heard that too. I still don't understand that, but that's okay. Just if you don't have a higher power, you can believe in my higher power and eventually it will come, just stay and know that it's not a race. Time takes time. And, just making little efforts every day, to pray to something or talk to something. It can be anything. You don't have to define it as God. But eventually you do need to define who he is and what he is to you. Because it makes it a lot easier for sure.
Beautiful. Heather, thank you so much for joining us today. I guess before we wrap up, is there anything else you want the folks out there listening to hear?
Oh gosh, it's just, it's a beautiful thing being on this side of it. It really is. Like it's, I think back to, when I would say like, how am I going to live my life without alcohol? That was my solution. I grieved so hard when I stopped drinking. It was like I lost my best friend. But my life today, like, it's amazing. I have some humility today. And I have peace in my life. My sponsor always says, do you want to be sober? Do you want to be peaceful? And I'm like, I want to be peaceful. Yeah, it takes work, but so much better on this side of it. So much better.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Heather. This has been beautiful, beautiful story, beautiful message. We're so glad you came.
Thank you guys. I love this. I listen to it every day. I get so excited when I Yes, I do. It's like my jam in the car, it's like, and I was not a podcast person, like I would be like, who the hell listens to podcasts? Like, it's too much for me. And I just love it now. So thank you guys for putting this together. It's very cool.
Thank you so much for being a part of it.
Thank you.
Thanks once again to Heather for joining us today. And thanks to you, the listeners. We truly appreciate your support. If you want to join us online, you can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/groups/Daily Reflection Podcast. Just realized there's over 300 members of the community there. Great conversation, great support. Really appreciate it. You can find us on Twitter at Daily Reflector. You can also read about all aspects of recovery on our blog. We have a new author. I'm so excited. Nan F. from Jacksonville Beach, Florida, joins us on the blog and has published a new story. I'd love for you to check that out. She was a guest on the podcast back on February 7th, and she talked about a path to faith. She wrote a wonderful article. You can find that at blog.dailyreflectionpodcast.com. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.